Hi, my name is Mark Crawley and welcome to Diversity Connect. Today we are going to be talking about the Autism Act. It's been recently in the news because there's been a few meetings around the progress of the Autism Act, how it's actually impacting or making any difference to autistic individuals in the UK in particular. So I think today what we're going to do is just go through exactly what it is, give you a bit of an update on some of the actions that we've seen relatively recently, and I suppose just give a bit of an opinion really on the type of things that it's trying to do. I'm going to be honest, sometimes even working in this space day in day out, I get a little bit confused by all of the initiatives that are there or being promoted to try and assist neurodivergent individuals. We had the Buckland report in 2024. There's a report or a focus with Stephen Timms at the moment, which we've covered on a previous webinar. And then obviously you've got the Autism Act of 2009. Which is the one we're going to talk about today. So I think it's one of those that we're going to go through, have a look and see exactly what it is, and as I mentioned already, where it lands today in 2025. So also just to know, we're using something a little bit different in terms of sharing slides, etc. So please forgive me if it doesn't quite work or it's a little bit too flashy, but look, things flying in everywhere. Look at this. So the Autism Act of 2009. Specifically what it is, and we're always open to feedback on our knowledge as well. So if anyone's watching this and has a different opinion or wants to fact check us or give us any updated information, we'd certainly welcome that. But it was at the time, it was a landmark piece of legislation in England specifically designed to improve services and support for autistic adults. It was the first ever disability specific law passed in the UK. It was needed because there was a bit of a lottery in support with a lot of autistic adults falling between gaps in services, often undiagnosed or unsupported. That, in my opinion, sounds quite familiar to now still, but listen, we'll get onto that in a second. The core purpose is to ensure that autistic adults receive the support they need to live independent and fulfilling lives, addressing historical inequalities in provision. So bit of an overview really there of where it's sat in 2009, but the idea really was to try and give people more formalized levels of support. What I would suggest has probably moved on when you look at some of this dialogue now is the focus more around inclusion, belonging, trying to bring people more into the workplace, etc. Whereas here you could argue a lot of this wording and a lot of this focus was a little bit ableist, etc. But this was the act in 2009. So if we look at some of the duties that local authorities in England were targeted with, they were given various tasks on the back of this act. So outside of the core focuses, the specifics really was they had to publish a strategy, right? They had to have something in place at local authority levels and NHS levels to say how autistic individuals' needs would be met. It mandated that local authorities in the NHS must have regard to this strategy and obviously issue guidance and how to meet this. So very localised. Training for staff involved in any of these areas is incredibly important. I've got friends who work in the NHS that are often going through I believe it's called the Oliver McGowan training, and it's the training that the NHS use, and the idea is that every individual who works at the NHS, regardless of function, has some training on how to support autistic individuals. There was a needs assessments that needed to be in place, so heighten the need for appropriate needs assessments for autistic adults, and data collection. Right, it was really important to have better data. And you look at the progress of organisations like Autistica. I don't know if they factored in or are prompted or are are in collaboration in any way with relation to the Autism Act, but there's no doubt that data has improved a lot more since 2009. But again, these were the specific duties on local authorities within England. Um, the other areas to look at is looking at the context and the initial impact, right? So pre 2009, it was a bit of a mess, right? As far as I know, many autistic adults struggled to access diagnosis, social care, mental health services, and employment. It was very fragmented, and there wasn't really a formalised approach to it. The Act, the initially brought autism into the legislative agenda and increased awareness, and of course led to a focus around national strategies and guidance. Also, the idea really, and it certainly was supported a lot more with the Equality Act in 2010, is it provided a legal lever for autistic individuals and their families for better services. Things like EHCPs, those type of things, were again legalised in terms of the amount of support that autistic individuals would get. Despite the legal framework, implementation was often inconsistent. Challenges included lack of funding, insufficient training, continued long diagnosis waiting lists, and trying to translate this very, very well-meaning policy into effective local practice. And I think if I look at what's happened since then, and we'll talk a little bit more about where we are today, there's various things that have happened. There's certainly an increase in self-diagnosis. There's certainly an increase in people who want to be diagnosed and are autistic, and obviously need this to be formalised in some ways, certainly for sometimes localised support, etc. But what we have now is like waiting lists up to 8 years in local areas, etc. So there's a variety of things going on at the moment, but you can see that it was probably a lot worse prior to 2009, and it means that there's still a lot of work to be done. But it's always interesting to me when I started looking at this is that it was very well meaning at the time, and I think a lot of the things that were being focused on when the Autism Act was brought out in 2009 are still very relevant now. And they're very relevant, I think, for two reasons. First of all is that there was a lot of good suggestions and good recommendations at that point. As I mentioned already, some of them are maybe a little bit patronizing and ableist in their approach. But the other thing is that there's still a need, right? There's still people who aren't getting the amount of support they need, etc. And you've only got to look at employment statistics. I think the latest statistics are 71% of autistic adults are unemployed within the UK. So there's a lot going on here. The other area is to look at is there was on the 1st of April a report released relating to autism policy and services, legislation and strategies, and it related back to the Autism Act, and it was almost like a snapshot of, okay, where are we now? Where are we now based around what was released then, various sort of touch point studies between the 1st of April and back in 2009. What's the state of play as we are at the moment? So again, it made reference to the Autism Act in this document, of course, which is good. There was also in 2021 a UK-wide strategy to encompass children and young people, not just adults, and it outlined a 5-year vision. We're not going to go too much into that today in detail, but the report will add on to the questions so you can have a look at it. Looking at previous English strategies prior to 2021-26, England had various things like the Think Autism strategy, the initial Fulfilling and Rewarding Life strategy, both focused on adults, but you can see that there's a lot of things that start, a lot of things sort of fizzle by the wayside. And I think I quite like the fact that the Autism Act of 2009 is the consistent fulcrum behind this, anything that we're trying to do. Doesn't mean it can't be amended, doesn't mean it can't be adjusted, etc. But you can see all these various initiatives just fall down the wayside. There's also some funding, right? The 2021-26 strategy committed nearly £75 million in funding for its first year to implement its objectives, right? And now you have to remember 2021 is obviously one of the key years after COVID, but we'll touch on that in a second. So this report covered a lot of areas. So we'll continue having a look at some aspects of this report now. So the broad focus areas that were reinforced in this report from April this year, or April in 2025, were the current strategy needs to continue to be aligned around 6 key themes: improving understanding and acceptance, which is a given; enhancing access to education; boosting employment, very, very key; tackling health and care inequalities; strengthening community and inpatient support; and improving criminal justice system support. So we're not going to talk too much about the criminal justice system today, but I did some work with one prison in Southeast London, and I couldn't believe how many individuals there were diagnosed autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, neurodivergent in general. It was incredible. So there's definitely a correlation there, but again, that conversation's maybe for another day. But you can see that these broad focus areas continue to be part of this report, part of the idea of moving things forward. And again, I think that consistency is really key. The other areas that were covered in this report, when it started looking at the impact, there was no doubt there was the COVID-19 and obviously the worldwide pandemic really caused a lot of challenges for neurodivergent individuals, not just in obviously stopping and deprioritizing some of the focuses that were in play, but also obviously the day-to-day impact for neurodivergent individuals and autistic individuals in this instance in particular. This revised strategy from 2021 that we're talking about between 2021 and 2026, it was generally well received, but concerns remain about sustaining funding beyond the first year. You remember that was £75 million in the first year. It's a bit inconsistent to see how money's been spent since then, and addressing broader social care issues. There has been definitely improvement in data quality, and it continues to try and focus around that, and also trying to reduce reliance on self-assessments. There's more that you can tell the government want more focus around diagnosis and making sure that they have accurate information and giving accurate support to autistic individuals. And of course, prioritization is key. And look, at the moment, where we have so many people waiting for support, so many people unemployed, it's still a major challenge for the UK, right? Particularly for England. And as of January 2025, the National Autistic Society continues to say that this needs to be a priority. It really does. I've seen various people through some of the largest charities and largest organizations talking a lot about, okay, how can we make this a priority? How can we continue to bring this in the focus, etc.? We know it's complex, we know it's challenging, we know it's costly in terms of funding, but it's really important. And of course, a lot of these areas were focused on England initially, but there are some areas there are some local, the other sort of countries within the United Kingdom are also doing things on a localized level, which are quite interesting as well. So if we look at those, so Wales has expanded its focus to broader neurodivergence improvement programs since 2022, with additional funding coming, and there's a code of practice to include other neurodivergent conditions or neurotypes. Scotland shifted towards a wider approach with the Learning, Intellectual Disability and Autism Transformation Plan in 2021, is committed to introducing a learning disabilities, autism and neurodivergence bill to promote rights. And Northern Ireland as the Autism Amendment Act, which significantly strengthened its autism strategy by mandating data collection on autistic individuals and focus on specific training for all of the public sector and public body staff, and also having an autism reviewer to monitor strategies' effectiveness. I mean, look at it very objectively there. You look at the work that Northern Ireland are doing now, and it certainly seems to be the most action-led, and certainly seems to be very much in line with the spirit and focus initially of the Autism Act. So I don't know everything that all of these local authorities are doing, and what not what local authorities, but the individual countries within the UK are doing. But you would suggest that Northern Ireland's there looks like it's probably the most action focused and measurable. But yeah, again, this is just obviously information we found out from our research as well. So what the summary really of the current focus is, and this is where we sort of go back to I suppose the original original summary right at the start of this call, is that they haven't really changed. Let's be honest. From when the Autism Act was initially launched in 2009, it's still focused on trying to improve diagnosis and reducing lengthy waiting lists and making sure that people get quality, timely diagnosis and the support they need. This post-diagnostic diagnostic support, you could argue now, is a little bit more career focused and employment focused than it was. And there's a bit more of a focus around giving people the opportunity to demonstrate strengths. And when you look at things like equality versus equity, it's far more in the mainstream. I would also suggest the education around neurodiversity is a lot better in general than it was in 2009. And because of that, you'd like to think that a lot of people get a lot more support and a lot more understanding and awareness as well. There's obviously been various reports, and still continues to be various reports around this post-diagnostic support. And this is in line with the next point, which is boosting employment, right? So this is still a major, major problem. Diversity started in 2002, and it's not really moved since then. It really isn't. I mean, I'm not saying that the diversity will be able to influence the employment statistics for neurodivergent autistic individuals in particular, but even with all of the initiatives we see and all of the work we see and all of the awareness, the employment stats haven't really changed dramatically. They really haven't. So again, when you look at all of these areas combined, it'd be quite interesting to see the progress over the next few years. Mental health support, of course, and making sure people are supported. You could suggest that this is probably the most progressed part of support for autistic individuals. But I do hear a lot of individual stories where it's really, really not on a day-to-day basis. And people, when you look at reductions in PIP allowances and people being reviewed, etc., it's not great. It really isn't. And trying to attack or cause challenges for that community is really not where we want to be. And of course, reducing those health inequalities and by tackling disparities in physical and mental health outcomes is, again, it's one of those areas of continued focus around all of the initiatives that come through. What it doesn't talk too much about is co-occurrence, because it's quite underdeveloped in terms of research at the moment. It doesn't talk too much about individuals that don't have a diagnosis, and if there's going to continue to be formalized support for those individuals, particularly as it's really challenging to do. And there's probably not enough practical focus on saying, right, we're going to get more people diagnosed, and we're going to be able to enable more people to be diagnosed by improving and increasing the amount of people who can have access to this, right? And I think that's still a real challenge. So all in all, right, when I look at the Autism Act and I look at the information that I've done some research on and Diversity have done some research on, it's a really interesting one to me because there seems to be a bit of an appetite. It looks very disjointed. COVID didn't help, of course. The focuses that were there initially are still relevant today, but also the problems, right? The same problems that were there then are still now. And if anything, you could argue they've increased, particularly as more individuals are identifying as autistic. So it's one of those to keep an eye on, I think, we're over the next couple of years. There's obviously there's a committee now which is looking at this on a continued basis with some individuals and key advocates and key voices within the autism and neurodiversity community. So it'd be interesting to see how it progresses, right? So, but hopefully it will mean that more people get more support, more diagnosis, and more employment opportunities going forward. If that starts to happen, then you would say that this has been a big success. I think my key suggestion is just trying to join up these approaches as much as possible. And also looking at best practice, you look at some of the work that's happening in Northern Ireland. We're going to do a little bit more research on that to see how impactful that is, but certainly on the face of it, it looks like it's a good step forward. So the next steps this will be added to the webinar collections, and will be free for everyone, where you can comment and ask questions. So this will be the free webinar for next month in August. Please let us know any thoughts on the Autism Act that we may have missed. It's really important to us to make sure we have a wide range of opinions on this. We've got a monthly meetup coming up on the 23rd of June 2025. This is being recorded on the 17th of July 2025. So again, we'll welcome any opinions on this. And of course, if you've got any questions or anything like that, or you want to venture any opinions, then please send us a message, and we'd love to hear from you. So thank you very much for watching this today. It's always a great opportunity for us to upskill ourselves and learn a little bit more about some of the things that are happening within the UK. And I think with this, we're hoping, and we're always positive and always optimistic that this will start to have an impact soon. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And scan the QR code to join the Diversa Connect community.